Hey, how's it going? This is Justin with Lesser Dog Tutorials. Welcome to part 5 in our point and click adventure game tutorial series for Unreal. This section will be all about rooms and transitions between rooms. In the description is a zip file which contains this image, and you'll want to right click it, go to Sprite Actions, apply Paper 2D settings, and then right click again, go to Sprite Actions, and convert to a sprite. And this is after you import it into your project, of course. Now go to the levels and duplicate the tower exterior level, but name it tower interior. And then we can open it up and we can delete a few things like the brush where we walk. We can delete the hotspot poster. And then we can select the background sprite and then change that sprite to the interior image. And then if you select the nav mesh bounds volume, we can kind of shrink it down to be a better size. And also the adventure cam confines extent, we can change the X value to 160. And then we can delete the split screen manager from this, and then also the recast nav mesh object. And then switch over to brush editing and the pen tool and deselect create convex polygon, change the extrude depth to 4, and then outline where the player can walk like we did previously. And once that's set, switch it to left, move it under the red line. And then if you switch it back to the top, we can recalculate the paths by building them. And then now everything will be green. If it's not green, hit P, I believe. And then we can switch back to the tower exterior level. And what we'll be doing is duplicating this, but first let's rename this to something like adventure data. And then if we duplicate it, we can rename this to tower exterior like before. And then if you open the tower exterior level, we're just going to delete the split screen manager. And then you can save that and open up adventure data, and we're going to delete everything except the split screen manager. And then with the adventure data level open and the level tabs open, we're going to drag both exterior and interior levels underneath the persistent level. And you can open that levels tab by going to Window, Levels. Now head back to your blueprints folder, and what we'll do is open the verb interaction interface blueprint, and we're just going to add one more function, and that's for on walk to. And then you can save that and close it. Now head to the hotspot blueprint, and we will implement this on walk to. So if you go to the interfaces dropdown and right click on walk to, select implement event, and there it is, and then we'll just copy face hotspot and clear verb so that we can fire those when we walk to something. Next, since we're doing level streaming, we're going to be loading each room on the fly, and doing so will not register the nav mesh paths. So we need to switch the nav mesh runtime generation from static to dynamic, which can be found in the project settings. Next, we'll want to make a door that will help us move from room to room. So in the hotspots folder, let's make a new blueprint class based on hotspot, and we'll call this BP_door. And with that open, all we're going to do right now is just create a few variables. So create a variable, and we'll call it level to load, and then the type will be of a name. And then we'll make another variable called current level, keep it the same type, and then a third variable called door label, which will be of a type string. And then we'll want to make each of these visible so that we can change them in the details panel. Next, we'll want to actually create the doors in the levels. So open up tower exterior first, and you won't be able to see it. So in the levels tab at the bottom, you'll have to select that eye to keep it visible. And then what we'll do is we'll switch to the brush editing mode again and use the pen tool, and we'll just draw around the door. All right, and with that selected, make sure we create a static mesh, and we'll save that in the meshes folder. And I'm just going to name this one door to tower interior. Cool, and now we can open up that mesh and select the hotspot material that we made before and save that. And you can delete it from the scene. because next we'll want to drag the door in and change the static mesh on the door to the door we just made. And then in the level to load, we'll say tower interior, same name as our other level. Current level, tower exterior, same name as the tower exterior level. And for the label, we'll say A1. And then for the hotspot description, I'll just call this tower door. And then a facing direction will be down. So now let's open the tower interior and do the same thing. And I'll just call this one door to tower exterior. And of course, we want to switch the material and then delete it from the scene, drag in the door blueprint, and assign the new static mesh and position it. And then we'll set the level to load to be tower exterior, the current level to be tower interior, and the door label, I want it to be the same as the other door, so we'll call this A1. Hotspot description, we can just say exit, and the facing direction we'll say down. And keep in mind, you can label the door anything you want. Just make sure that both doors are labeled the exact same. So let's open up the adventure character blueprint, and we'll be adding a couple things to this. So we can select all of the nodes at the event begin play up until we set the bark text, and you can cut those because we're going to paste them in another function. So then create a new function, and we'll call this assign room camera. And this is where you can paste all those nodes. So at the beginning, we're going to get all actors of class, and we're going to select the camera blueprint BP Adventure Cam. We can delete these nodes here. And from the out actors pin on the get actors of class, we're going to get a copy and we're going to have 0 be the integer. And then you can hook that up to the set view target with blend. And then from that same get node, we want to hook that up to the set player variable. So it should look like this. Now create a new function that will just be called teleport to location. And it's going to be pretty simple. We're just going to have an input of a location vector, and then we'll add the node set world location for the capsule component. And we just hook up the location to the new location input, and that's all that we'll be doing in this function. Now we need something that will persist through all levels that can handle the transition between rooms. And so the answer to this problem is something called a game instance. So if we add a blueprint and we select the game instance as the type, we can rename this to BP_adventure instance. And we can open that up. And the purpose of this will be to run custom events. And the first custom event we want to make is called event load starting room. And then another custom event called event load room. And one more thing that we'll do in here is we'll create a function called find door. And what this will do is just search for a door to transition through. So for the first node, let's do get all actors of class and select the door blueprint. And then we'll want to do a for each loop because there could be more doors than just one. But remember, the thing that we're searching for is going to be the door label. And for instance, you can see this one's A1, and it's the same on the exterior, purposefully. And so what we'll be doing is searching for that door label. So if we add an input on the function, and we call it door label, we make it of a type string, then we can drag out from the array element and search for the doors label and see if it matches the door label that we pass into this function. So if we do an equals node and we just hook them both up, then we make sure that once we find this door, we're good to go. So we'll do a branch, and the loop body will be connected to this branch. And then for the next part, I want to get the adventure character. But I want to divert this and head over to the blueprint folder. I want to create something in the blueprint section called a blueprint function library. And I'm going to call this BFL underscore adventure library. Now, the beauty of a blueprint function library is that you can create functions in here that you can use anywhere in your project. So to demonstrate that, I'm going to create a new function. I'm going to call it getAdventureCharacter. And all we need to do is the typical getPlayerController, and then from that, we'll cast to the adventure controller. And then from this, we'll get the reference to the player that it has. And we can add a return node. And in the return node, we can connect it up to the cast node, but we have to add the output, which in this case is going to be the adventure character. And we could just name it adventure character. But make sure you change the type to the BP adventure care class. And we won't need the in and out exec pins for this. So just like that get player controller, we can hit this pure checkbox. And now if we want to use our get adventure character node in the adventure instance, we can just find it and it's already there and it will do everything for us. And since it's pure, you can see it has no exec pins. So dragging from this, we can just find the teleport to location function that we made earlier. And from the array element, we're going to find the walk to position, and we'll connect that up to the location, and then connect the node to the branch, and make sure it's connected to the true exec pin. And at the end, we'll just add the return node. But when the loop is completed, if we haven't found anything, we still want to exit, but let's add a print string and that just says door not found. And then before we leave this blueprint, we want to drag out from the array element and we're going to find the facing direction because from the adventure character, we want to set the facing direction after the door has been used. So connect that up to the facing direction input pin, and then we can clean up the blueprint a little bit, however you want to do it. I'm just going to I think I'm going to add a reroute node to the line going to the walk to position and then hook it up to the facing direction, something like that, however you want to clean it up. Now, if you head to the hotspot blueprint, I want to fix something that I did incorrectly previously. In the face hotspot function, I set the facing direction of the hotspot instead of the player controller's facing direction. So swap that out and make sure that that is setting the player controller's version and not the hotspot's. So now let's go into the door blueprint and you can delete everything on the event graph. And all we're going to do, since this inherits from the hotspot, is that we want to override whatever functions we want to have the character use the door. So I'm going to override walk to and on use. And these two events should both call some sort of universal function to load a room. And the perfect place to put this function will be our adventure library function library. So let's head over to that and add a new function called load room. And then we'll add an input pin called door used and make it of the type BP underscore door. And then we'll add another function called get adventure instance. And just like get adventure character, it's just going to get the game instance, cast to our adventure instance, and then return that using our return node. And then, of course, we want to say that this is a pure function also so that it doesn't need to be hooked up through exec pins or anything. And then in the load room function, we can just place the get adventure instance node, but we first need to add a door variable in the adventure instance to save this reference to. So create a new variable in there for the door, and then back in the adventure library from the adventure instance, we can set that door using the door we passed through the load room function. And then from the adventure instance, we'll run the event load room. Now we can call the load room function on the BP door blueprint in the event graph. And then for the door used, we just get a reference to self. And then we're done with the BP door blueprint, so you can close that. So let's fill some more functions out in our adventure library. So we'll add another function that we're going to call getAdventureController. And just like the getAdventureCharacter and getAdventureInstance, it's going to do the same thing. Just retrieve what it says, the adventure controller. We just get the adventure controller and then we set the function to pure. Now, while we're at it, why don't we organize some stuff? So these getters here, we'll just organize them into a category called getters. And then we can add another function called getHUD, because we'll use this in a bit. And it will return the HUD that we use. So we'll get all widgets of class, specifically the HUD. And then we'll get a copy using the integer 0. And we will return the HUD. And we will make this pure too. And then we can move it into the getters category. Now let's make another function called load starting room. And what we'll do first is get the adventure instance, and then we'll run the event on the event graph in the adventure instance called event load starting room. And then we can put the load room and load starting room functions in a category that we can call loading. Now over in the adventure controller, we're going to add a variable that we're going to call lock input. And this bool will be placed in the getClicked macro. So we want to check at the beginning of this function if either the isPerformingTaskInteraction bool or lock input bool is true. So we wouldn't want to use an and node, we'd want to use an or. So either one of these, if they are true, we're not going to allow the click to register. And then the next thing we want to do is in the event graph, right at the end of the event begin play chain, we'll just add the load starting room function. The next thing I want to do is I'm going to update the left mouse button section because it kind of doesn't work as well as it should. So right after get clicked in the hotspot section, we're going to add the clear current path function. And then after the clear current path function on the nothing section, we're going to add the interrupt action. So it will reset everything before walking to a clicked location. Then, if we open the clear current path function, we can remove the interrupt action node and instead just go straight to the return. Next, open up perform interaction and drag out from that target hotspot, and we're going to add the on walk to event, which we can hook up to the walk to output pin on the switch node and the output pin of the function itself. Now back in the adventure library, let's add a couple functions. The first one will be lock player input, and in that function we're going to get the adventure controller, and then we're going to set lock input to true. It's very simple. And then we make the other function called unlock player input, do the same thing, but it's setting it to false. And then those can be in a category that you can call like player. Next, we're going to create a new function called activate current camera. And I'll just put it in a category called transitions. And then I'm going to get the adventure character. And from that character, I'll assign the room camera. And what that's going to do is run this function that gets any available adventure camera and then sets the new view target with blend. Okay, now if we head over to the HUD widget blueprint, and over in the hierarchy, right-click the vertical box and wrap it with an overlay. Then drag an image onto the overlay, and we're going to stretch it horizontally to fill, and we're going to align the vertical alignment to the top and set the Y value of the size to 145. Then we can change the color to black. Now, make sure that its name is something memorable like black screen, and make sure that is variable is ticked. And that's all we need to do here. Back over in the adventure library, we're going to create another function that we're going to call show black screen. And then another function called hide black screen. And both of these can go into the transitions category. And all these are going to do is either show or hide that black screen we just made. So we'll do the get HUD function that we made earlier, and then get the black screen, and then set the visibility to visible or hidden. So in this case, since this is the hide black screen, we'll set it to hidden. Copy all the nodes, go to the show black screen, paste them, and change the visibility to visible. And that's all we need to do for that. Now over in the adventure instance, we can finally start populating these two important events. So starting with the event load starting room, we're going to get a node called load stream level by name. So let's add a variable called starting level and change the type to name. And then we could change the default value to name tower exterior. And that's the level that we'll be starting in. And anytime that we want to start in a new level, we just have to change that variable. After the load stream level node, let's look for one called activate current camera. And it's from the adventure library we made. And then we'll get the find door function in this blueprint. And then we'll need to make another variable, and this one we'll call starting door label, and change that to a string. And the default value we'll say is A1, the same label that we assigned both of our doors. And we can drag that variable in and hook it up to the door label input on find door. Next, we'll want to hide the black screen, because if it's visible, which it will be by default, we want to get rid of it. And then we can get the adventure controller and interrupt the action so that it resets any sort of saved variable. And then make sure on the load stream level we tick both of those boxes, make visible after load, and should block unload. And before we forget, we need to go into the project settings to set the adventure instance as our default game instance. So search for game instance and you'll see the game instance class needs to be set to the one we made. Now, back in the adventure instance, let's find out what we're doing on the event load room. The first thing we want to do is lock player input so they can't move, and then we'll show the black screen to indicate that the level is being loaded. And then we'll actually do the load stream level by name again, and then we'll get the current door variable, and from that door we'll decide what level needs to be loaded, and that will be hooked up to the level name. Then tick both of those boxes like before. Next, the player can't move, there's a black screen, and the level's been loaded. What happens next? Well, we need to unload the previous level. So we'll take the current door again, and from the current door we'll say current level, and then we'll connect that to the level name. Now, what we want to do is activate the new camera, because the old camera's gone and the new camera's there. And then we'll do a little delay so we have a little bit of time so it kind of feels like those old games when they load to a new room. And then we'll want to find the matching door using the current door's label. However, when we unload the room, the current door reference goes away. So what we need to do is save that room label so that we can use it later. So in between the load and unload levels, we'll add a new variable, we'll call it temp door label, and we'll set that to the current door's label. Now, when we set this and we remove the current door reference when we unload the last room, we'll always still have what the label should be. So we can bring in that label variable and hook it up to the find door function. After we found the door, we want to hide the black screen. So now we can see, and then what we want to do is we'll get the adventure controller and we'll interrupt action to clear all verbs or anything that the character's doing. And if the character's talking, we want to clear that too. So get the adventure character and run the clear bark function. So now everything will be reset. And the last thing to do would be to unlock the player input so they can move again. Now, also before we forget, we want to select each door and change the walk to position to an actual position that the player can get to. And make sure that you do that for both the tower exterior door and the tower interior door. Now there's another issue that I want to fix, and that is in the adventure character, I have the determine idle direction before the do once node. And the do once node should run everything after it only once, and that's where I want to determine the idle direction. So simply just moving that past the do once node is a good start. Now, when a character moves to a hotspot, I don't want the determine idle direction to override what direction the character is supposed to face. So I'll need to create some sort of way to determine when a hotspot interaction is making the player face a direction and when it's not. So in the adventure character, if we were to open the determine idle direction, we can create a variable, which is another bool, and we'll just call this override facing direction. And then we can drag that into this function and we'll branch out and we'll add this right at the beginning. Now, if override facing direction is false, it will continue as normal. But if it's true, it will skip the whole decision and it will go straight to setting the moving direction to not moving. And then, after we set the moving direction to not moving, we can set the override facing direction back to false. Now, all that's left is that we need to set the override facing direction to true whenever we're interacting with a hotspot. So, if we go to the adventure controller and we move up to the section where we're moving based on where we're clicking, then the walk to hotspot macro might be the best spot. So in there, right after we set the hotspot interaction bool to true, why don't we just get the adventure character and then set the override facing direction bool to true here. Okay, so before we test this out, I should tell you that for me, I had to restart the editor in order for it to work. It's a weird little situation, but try restarting the editor before you test out your game. And now we're going to test it and we're going to interact with things. And he faces the correct direction every time we interact, and that's perfect. Now, if we use the door, he goes black, he loads into the new room. We can walk around and exist in this new room. We can interact with the door, he'll face the right way, and then we can just use the exit and he'll walk out. Everything is working extremely well. I hope it worked well for you. If not, try going back through or ask questions if you need to, and I'll try to help you out. Thank you so much for watching. If you like what you see, please like the video, subscribe, hit that bell notification thing. That's probably useful too. And I'll see you in the next video.